Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 5 of Life, the Complete Story. I am Tyler, one of your hosts, as always, joined by my co-host, Alex.
Hello, everyone. So, today, like it said, episode 5 of the title, we're continuing our look at the phylum Cnidaria, which is in the animal kingdom. But before we do that, we're going to do our first segment, as always, our nature in the news. So, Tyler, if you want to take it away with that.
Yep, let me just pull the article up right here.
Yep.
So I found this one to be really cool. Kind of doesn't really fit with what we've been talking about with the Cnidarian stuff, but it's pretty groundbreaking stuff. Came out 11 April 2024. A newly discovered organelle inside some algal species. So this organelle is called what do they call it?
Nitroplast, it looks like.
Nitroplast, yes. And the nitroplast kind of is able to fix nitrogen, takes the nitrogen gas in the air and turns it into usable compounds for plants, similar to some bacteria. So originally we thought that it was only bacteria that could do nitrogen fixation, but we're seeing that there's a kind of like a coevolution here, where these algae have over time eaten this bacteria species that has been known to nitrogen fix, and has kind of developed as an organelle because it seems that this organelle grows with the cell, not on its own, and that it splits. So whenever the cell goes through mitosis, it splits in the same step of mitosis as the rest of the organelles.
Okay, yeah, so the article says here, that, like Tyler said, it's something we used to always think was only like a bacteria and archaea thing, like a prokaryotic cell thing. So this is really groundbreaking news. It said in the article here it's being called the first nitrogen-fixing eukaryote, which, a little chemistry lesson, usually like the nitrogen in the atmosphere is not usable to our cells. It has to be changed to a usable form, usually in the form of like a nitrate.
Nitrates,
yes, which those bacteria do in the soil, which usually there's a mutualistic relationship between plants, especially legumes, so like clover, peanuts, beans, like soybeans, they can fix that nitrogen. But now with an algae species being able to do that, that's a very big thing.
And another thing is like one of the major thought camps for how these more important organelles kind of came to exist in eukaryotes, like some of the more eukaryote specific organelles, like this mitochondria, like the chloroplast, like this nitroplast. The theory is that they were prokaryotic organisms that kind of co-evolved or became mutualistic with these eukaryotic cells until they slowly became part of it. So it's cool that we're getting to see this in action versus just a theory from before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like it says here, that it is groundbreaking science for sure.
But that's the conclusion of this article. It's was published on April 11th, so this Thursday. It's past Thursday of our recording.
Yeah, so very recently, which is super cool. It said here, like, it's almost something they may in the future be able to use that, do a little bit of like a genetic modification sort of thing. They could almost get like crop species to make their own nitrogen, which would very much reduce the need of nitrogen fertilizers, which is a big thing because that's what causes a lot of the algal blooms you see, especially in like the Gulf of Mexico or in the slow-moving rivers, is all that fertilizer runoff.
And if we get this modification, it's much more possible than just the bacteria we had before, because now we're using a eukaryote, and we have eukaryotic DNA versus just kind of like strings, some bacterial DNA.
Yeah.
They just work differently because a prokaryote's DNA is just a string of fluff and
Yeah,
not
it's much
really.
simpler. Yeah,
Yeah,
so this is like evolution before our eyes kind of thing, like major evolution right before our eyes sort of thing,
right.
which is very very cool.
But that's all I have this week for our nature in the news. I'll throw it back over to Alex so he can get started on, I believe, Anthozoa is where we're starting today, correct?
Okay, yeah. So let me pull up real quick a little thing on Anthozoa. So Anthozoa is our other group of the Cnidarians. So it's our one of our other classes of Cnidaria.
Right.
Um,
Last week we talked about the Mixozoa, a
yeah,
grouping of um, obligate parasites that are found in annelids and other worms as a definite host, or definitive host,
yeah,
and use vertebrates as their intermediate, correct?
yeah, I believe so. Or yeah, they can use vertebrates or invertebrates, but aquatic, of course, aquatic species.
Right.
So of course my computer decides now it's time to be slow. So at least here we go. So it is Anthozoa is when people think of Cnidaria. This is one of those two real big groups. This includes your some extinct it's divided into some extant classes of Sclerotinia and Octocoralia. So these are a lot of times your corals and your anemones, those ones that pretty much exhibit for the vast majority of their life cycle, especially their what we consider like their adult life cycle, they're in that polyp form. So they're anchored to a base and they have their tentacles facing upwards, the way like a sea anemone sea fan does. So that flower looking appearance, like a big central gastro gastrovascular cavity. So the mouth, of course, kind of that big central space, comparative to the body size, of course, because coral polyps are very small. The sea anemone, sea fans, those polyps they're a bit bigger. It says here about 200 millimeters in length. The vast majority of these species live in tropical waters. They like that warmer water. There are some colder weather or colder water species, but colder is a relative. They're more um, like subtropical or like temperate zone, not so much in those like Arctic zones. But they do, like many other Cnidarians, they have nematocysts, those stinging cells that are on their tentacles that they use to capture prey and like anemones. They actually capture things as large as full grown fish, of course, save for the clownfish, which has grown a symbiotic relationship with the anemone. Um, as well as things that are dropped. Now, your corals, on the other hand, they do more of the filter feeding, like we talked about with the sponges, but they do so a little differently since they are very small. When you see corals, they are usually a large collection of thousands to millions of these small little coral polyps. So if I can find a picture, I will show. Um, Here we go. So usually, when you look at a coral, uh, yeah, here we go. Let me I can bring this up. It wants me to sign in. Hold on. I apologize.
So while he's finding his picture, I'll kind of reiterate his description is
There
uh,
we go.
a coil is a multi organismal kind of colony where it's thousand. Yes,
So here,
exactly.
so see your coral, your whole coral structure. These little tiny guys that you can see here for our viewers, that in the zoomed in, those are your polyps. They have the small bodies, and this is just the one type of coral. A lot of times, especially your stony corals, because there are hard, stony and soft corals. Um, soft corals are a little more like this. You'll see them like this, like the sea fans are actually in some cases soft corals, where they have more. They look like a big flat fan. They have the like main ridges that spread out, and then in between those, they have the little finger-like structures that are your soft coral. Your stony coral, usually those polyps are encased in a um, calcified, like almost like an exoskeleton. It's like a shell that just the end of the polyp, those little tentacles will come out of. And um, with those, yeah, so that is how they are. A lot of them, what gives corals, especially their very bright colors, they have symbiotic algae that live with them. In the group, Zooxanthellae is the algae that lives in them. That's why a lot of them are very brightly colored, especially your shallow water tropical species of coral. You get that wide range of color. Um, your deeper corals that don't get the light, especially like we talked about, those chemosynthetic deep sea corals, of course, don't have these because they don't need to have the colors.
Right, they don't need to be attracting these.
The light rays,
Yeah.
that light energy. But there are, of course, all around the world is this Anthozoa class. Pretty much anywhere there would be like a sort of similar to like a reef system, this organisms in this class exist.
Right. And like most people think of reefs as a warm water tropics type ecosystem, but there's cold water reefs further up the Atlantic. There's reefs off the coast of Washington on the west coast, and I'm sure there's reefs off European coast as well.
Correct.
But
Yeah.
we're not from there, so we don't know from our own experiences.
Correct. Yes.
But Anthozoa is divided into 3 extant classes. There's more extinct classes, but they kind of died out around the Triassic period during the where the dinosaurs lived. Those 3 classes are Octocoralia, Hexacoralia, Seriantharia. So Seriantharia is the smallest out of these, and this is comprised of these tube-dwelling anemone, but they're in a different class from anemones. Anemones are from the Hexacoralia.
Yeah. So these are all subclasses. Would be.
So Anthozoa is a subphylum of Cnidaria.
Okay.
So it's like like a bigger group than a class, but a smaller group than the phylum.
Okay.
Where so Anthozoa is all the corals and stationary things,
Correct.
and Medusazoa is all the more mobile things.
Okay.
Okay. So these are classes. So this is the Serianthia is a tube-dwelling anemone, which means they bury themselves in soft sediments and have their nettles kind of come out of a mucousy tube.
So similar to that, like how I showed the picture of the coral polyps that are on the coral, but like just one large polyp-looking structure.
Right.
Of course, there's usually a lot that are together, but it'd be like one long, like you said, the tube, and then it just fans out.
Into the
kind of like a troll doll sort of deal.
Yeah, troll doll hair covered in nematocysts because they sting. Nematocysts are the stinging cells that we talked about last week. And these groupings are called tychocysts with a silent P. So that's the smallest group of Anthozoa, called Seriantheria. We'll go into Hexacoralia next.
Yeah, so like Hexacoralia, or like I said, your anemones as well as your kind of stony corals, and there's within the subclass Hexacoralia, it looks like there are 6 orders. One of them being your stony corals, your sea anemones.
What was that?
So sorry, I was I was talking about with the stony corals. You have your black corals, and then one that Zooxantheria, which looks like those are kind of just another type of coral, different classifications of them. And then lastly, you have Octocoralia,
Right.
which is your kind of your soft corals, your sea feathers. Um, if you want to go into those a little more, Tyler.
Yeah, I can go into Octocralia. These are, as Alex said, the more soft corals. They resemble the stony corals in appearance and in polyp size, but they don't have the stony skeleton. They're more spongy. And each polyp has 8 tentacles, feather-like in shape, kind of like how a normal polyp looks, kind of like that stalk with feathery tendrils that come off of it to catch their filter food.
Mm-hmm.
They're colonial, like most other corals, and it is the polyp is largely embedded within the skeleton, with only the uppermost surface, including the tentacles and mouth, projecting above the surface. So most of the body is actually inside of its skeleton, with only its cnidocysts coming out, and
Yeah.
they are monophyletic, which means that all of their ancestors came from one common ancestor.
Okay. Yeah. So they all have pretty similar spacing on the phylogenetic tree.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Yeah. Cool. Very cool. Well, now that'll lead us into the other side of Cnidaria. What we're talking about today is, as we said, usually you see Medusa and polyp structures. Now, of course, we didn't talk about with the corals. They actually do spend some time in that polyp stage, usually when they're
Medusa stage.
or the Medusa stage. Sorry, that is usually like after the fertilization, when they first are produced, like the babies. They spend a little bit of that time in the Medusa stage. They travel around. That's how you get reefs that grow bigger over time, especially how you'll get more than just like one. Like there's not just one species of coral is one giant structure. How you get very similar species of coral. And then once they implant into some sort of substrate, they will start building the coral structure that we are familiar with when we think of coral, as well as they, like many other cnidarians, they do bud, which is how the coral structures as well grow much larger and larger because you get those budded organisms that grow into the larger.
Right, because they can do both. They can reproduce sexually and asexually. So
Correct.
they'll grow on top of itself by budding, and then they'll kind of expand elsewhere through sexual reproduction and the Medusa stage.
Yeah.
On the flip side, in Medusazoa, the juvenile stages and the baby stages are found in the polyp phase to kind of grow and develop large enough that it won't get eaten immediately.
Yeah, so that leads us into our next group, Hydrozoa, which is
Medusazoa.
Oh, is it Medusazoa? Was that...
Hydrozoa is a class within Medusazoa.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yes.
Then
but you can talk about Hydrozoa.
I say I'll talk about Hydrozoa because at least for the for our little cheat sheet here, all we had was Anthozoa and Hydrozoa. So at least I'll start into Hydrozoa, and then if we're able to get into Medusazoa, we will. So for Hydrozoa, it's another one of those subgroups of Cnidaria. These about 3,700 species. They're a very diverse group that show both forms of the life stages, both polyp and medusa forms, at various times for various amount of times. So that's why they're a little bit separate from the regular Medusazoa, is because they don't spend the vast majority of their time as one or the other. A fair amount of them are, most of them are, I should say, marine, so they live in the saltwater in the oceans. There are some freshwater ones that can be found, and of course they can reproduce sexually, asexually. Usually, you find them as either colonies of polyp, or which is say colonies of asexual polyps, or free swimming sexual medusae. So as the free swimming medusae exhibit male female, the polyps usually do not. And a lot of times they're benthic, so they're on that bottom level of the
Seafloor.
seafloor. Yeah, that seafloor. But you do find some that are free floating. Actually, some of the more well-known ones are free floating, like the Portuguese man of war is in the Hydrozoa group, a smaller group called the siphonophores, which are those free floating ones.
Here's a little picture for those that are unfamiliar.
Yeah, that is a Portuguese man of war. So go ahead. I was going to say their bell there that you can see, as well as they have their tentacles. Those are actually it's actually a colony of organisms, not just one single organism, which most people think of, similar like a regular jellyfish. That's why they grow to such large amounts. The bell there, that floating part, is more of the Medusa stage, and then on the tentacles there, you get more of the polyp stage, which has the nematocysts on them. And when they grow, there's something as I was reading through research in here, they are also classified. They have a vellum inside of the bell, so there's like an extra layer inside the bell of the Medusa, which distinguishes them from Medusazoa, as well as they produce gametes from ectodermal, so that outer layer of tissue rather than their internal tissue. So most sexually reproducing organisms produce their gametes, so the sexual cells, inside of the body, but these do not. They produce them on the outer surface and then release them that way.
Interesting.
So, yeah, of course, they can be found all over the world in all kinds of water environments, fresh, brackish, marine water. They don't find them on the continent of Antarctica just because it's all frozen. There's no liquid water for them to live on, but of course in the seas around them they can be found. And really they don't you don't see them in like real heavy surf, so like those real rocky beaches that have a lot of wave activity. You don't see them just because they get beat up too much. But pretty much anywhere else, especially in those warm shallow waters, like most other living things in the ocean, they love that reef zone because that's where all the food is.
Right. I will go ahead and move into another class in the Medusazoa. I will go ahead and talk about Cubozoa.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Cubozoa is a fun one.
Is the box jellyfish related to, but not in the same class as true jellyfish. So originally they were in that class, but up until about 1973, we decided they're a little bit different and we should put them in their own class due to their lack of strobulation. And strobulation is whenever you asexually reproduce in the jellyfish. So they don't do that.
Oh, okay.
And there are 51 species of box jellyfish. That's what the Cubozoa are, the box jellyfish. If that wasn't identified based off the name Cubo, correct. It's the smallest class of Cnidarians, including corals and everything else, with 50 species. It has a squarish bell. Where it gets its name.
And then as well, they have a on their bell, those square bells. They actually
Yep.
set like at the corners of the cube, and they come off in bundles. So that's how they
what time is it?
Have their apologies. They have their tentacles. They use their tentacles, of course, to hunt and catch their prey. They're actually very strong swimmers. and they're classified differently because they have these couple different layers. We can share real quick a picture to show the. This is from the Animal Diversity Web. Show kind of what a cubozoa looks like. As you can see, they're cubic in shape. Those corner structures where the tentacles come off of. That is something that's specific to cubozoa. Tyler, if you want to go a little more into beyond that. But as I talked a little bit about like cubozoans, of course, how they have their tentacles coming off the corners in those clumps. They're strong swimmers. They're actually predators, so they will hunt food.
Right, they're not. They don't filter feed. They hunt their food.
Yeah.
They
come in a wide variety of sizes.
Yeah, and they're oftentimes translucent and a lot of times deadly.
Yeah, they have a very strong sting. Some of the most the strongest sting venom in the Cnidarians. It's incredibly, in some cases at least. There's one that many people know of. It's in the area around Australia. It's called the Irukandji. It is almost microscopically small, like super tiny, and has an incredibly powerful and painful sting to the point you get stung, you will spend days to weeks in the hospital. Like there's no might. You will spend a good amount of time in a hospital in a significant amount of pain.
Right. So I don't know if you talked about this, but box jellyfish have a more developed nervous system than other jellyfish. They
Correct.
have a ring nerve around the base of their bell. I don't know if you discussed this or not.
I did not know. Go for it.
Actually, sweet. So the only other places found is in crown jellyfish, and this nervous system is kind of what coordinates their pulsing used for motion.
Mm-hmm.
Most other jellyfish are just kind of floating by and awkwardly convulsing through the ocean. Since these ones are predatory themselves, they use this ring nerve to control their bell to kind of pulse through the water to collect their prey.
Yeah, absolutely. Like he said, with that ring nerve, they're not quite like eyes, but in those corner structures that we talked about, they have like a structure similar to an eye, which helps them hunt. They're actually able to sort of see their prey, and they will catch fish almost as big as they are. In some cases.
That system. Did you cover what it's called? It's called a Rapallia.
I did not.
The Rapallia nerves are kind of what gives them, not exactly, like you said, not exactly eyes, but a visual guidance system. Kind of like electric currents and stuff like that. How similar to sharks. Yes, only they can partly observe what's around them, and they are found in the Indian and South Pacific oceans.
Yeah, so not something you'd find if you live on the East Coast of the United States, Europe, Western Africa. You won't find these, or I should say, Eastern South America as well. This is not something that you would find. But if you live in that Pacific Ocean, like Eastern Asia, Australia, the Western United States, and South America, or the western side of the Americas, you can and will find these. And your best thing to do with these is avoid them because they can be quite deadly. And looking here on the map, doesn't look like they quite reach the western side of the Americas, but you never know. I think a lot of that's just because that especially like in the northern side of North America, that northwestern side, it is a cold water current as opposed to a warm water current, like how the eastern United States is.
Right. That will conclude our little discussion on cubozoa. That leaves us with 3 remaining classes to go over. We'll start. We're on to Scyphozoa next.
Okay.
Scyphozoa are the true jellyfish. They have that planktonic Medusa phase, really small, polyp form. I mean, which goes into a longer living Medusa stage.
Correct. Yeah. So you'll see them, various shapes, sizes, many different colors. When you see a jellyfish, these are the ones you think of. When you think jellyfish, these are the ones you think of. They have the bell, they have the tentacles that come down that have the stinging cells on them. But they kind of radiate from that bottom edge of the dome. It's not like the cubozoans where they come from the corners. They're all the way around, so they tend to have a much denser mass of tentacles, though not quite as long as the cubozoans. But some of them, they can be quite small, 2 centimeters, all the way up to 2 meters across. So 1 inch to...
Are you saying across the bell?
Correct.
Or in terms of length?
Across the bell, I believe.
Okay, because there's...
In diameter, yeah.
Okay, so
across the bell. So 1 inch in diameter, incredibly small, up to 6 feet 7 inches across.
That's
so
massive.
They
That's
get
a human.
Yeah, that is the species Cyanea capillata, if I can pull that guy up. The lion's mane jellyfish.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought it was.
Yeah.
They are massive, and they have that 2-meter bell, and the just trail of tentacle that they have following it is that's like a crab.
Sorry, that's for my invasive. Hold on. That's the invasive species. I apologize. I clicked the wrong thing. I want that one. That is that jellyfish, that lion's mane jellyfish I was talking about.
Absolutely
quite
massive.
Large, as you see that very dense mass of tentacles, but coming from that outer edge. As you can see, different from the box jellyfish, there's no like other structure within this inside. They usually, I think jellyfish, they'll have 2 layers, I believe, like an inner and outer membrane of the bell. The cubozone, I think the thing that makes the cubozoans different is they have that 3rd layer that's like that muscle, quote unquote, that allows them to pulse. These, while the bells will move and they can swim, it's not nearly with the
it's not the predominant motion.
Correct. Yeah, usually they just float. And that's why you get those washed up on shore at beaches, while usually box jellyfish you don't find washed up on shore, but you will find them in those very shallow edge waters. I should say, at least not to the extent that you would find a regular jellyfish.
Some jellyfish look like aliens.
They do. It's crazy. You'll see them in both marine and freshwater environments. I know in South America, there are large freshwater pools that have bioluminescent jellyfish that you can see. They come very close to the surface. They glow a incredibly bright blue color, which is very cool. But look here, they have found fossilized Scyphozoans all the way in places like Wisconsin, which are Blackberry Hill, Wisconsin, which, for those who are not from the United States, are very it's an incredibly it's an inland it's state, other than being near the Great Lakes. So that's something way back in time. America used to have an inland sea that ran the middle of the country, and this is where these fossils would have come from.
Do you have a date range for it?
Look at Cambrian. Yeah, trace fossils in Cambrian tidal flats is what I'm looking at here. So awesome. Very old.
Yes.
A couple hundred million years ago.
Anything else to add on the Scyphozoans?
Not on the Scyphozoans right now, no. I think they're pretty, like we talked about, they have those, they are mostly in the Medusan form, but they do have a polyp phase that they will they'll grow as polyps as when they're very small until they get to and then those polyps can bud asexually to produce the Medusa, or they can make more polyps, but usually they're in the Medusa phase, which is the sexual reproduction phase.
Right. That leaves us with two classes left. I figure since we just talked about the true jellyfish, we'll move into the stalked jellyfish, also known as Staurozoa, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It has one extant order, and only has a couple species, I believe. They are not well researched. Um, there's about 50 known species, but they potentially have a second extinct order inside of them.
Okay.
Little more research needed for that. Very small, approximately 1 to 4 centimeters, so up to 2 inches.
Mm-hmm.
Marine, like most other Cnidarians. And they typically attach themselves to things. So they're jellyfish, but they're more sessile.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a hybrid almost of a jellyfish and an anemone.
Yeah, a little bit.
So I don't quite understand why it's in Medusazoa versus Anthozoa. The only reason I can see is that reproductive cycles
maybe because
are
they're
more similar.
Yeah, they may be more of a soft body, similar to how the Medusa, their polyps, like, cause you think Hydrozoa, they have, that's in Medusazoa, they show both stages. Staurozoa, I think, is more of that that early, and looking at a tree here from a research article, it looks like Staurozoa is a older branching off of Medusazoa, so that may be part of that earlier branching.
So an earlier divergent, earlier
Correct.
on in the fossil record that says that it branched from the same Cnidarian that everybody that all the other Medusazoas did,
and then
but
you get Hydrozoa, and then those broke off, and then you got the two groups of Cubozoa and Scyphozoa.
Right.
So that's why those are so similar, and in that sense.
I got you.
That's why the Cubozoans, so the two jellyfish, and then the Hydrozoans are similar to both, but a little more. You see more of the polyp stage. Staurozoa is much more of the polyp stage, and you see a little bit less of that Medusa stage.
I gotcha. Yeah. So there's not much on them. Very sparse. Very few species.
Yeah, it looks like here that it's similar to. I'll pull up this picture here. Oh, actually, on a different picture. They look almost like an upside down jellyfish.
Almost.
Right here. So you can see that is part of Staurozoa. You can see it's more of that polyp stage, but you can see here where that Medusa could come off and be its own kind of free floating, but the vast majority of the time they're in this polyp stage.
And I'm assuming it's connected to that branch or whatever at the bottom.
Yeah, I think so.
It's more of a connection than its actual body form.
I believe so. I'm not 100%. So that's why you see those in that form versus your Medusa. Of course, you will see them as the Medusa, but not as much.
Right. That leaves us with one final class for today. That will be Polypodiazoa. Yes, there are another genus of Cnidarian parasites, but they fit in that same tree as other Medusozoa versus the Medusozoans, who kind of branched off earlier.
Okay. And it looks like kind of reading here. There's really only one species in this.
Yes.
Is there?
Yeah, it's like one genus.
One genus. Sorry.
Yes. Yes. It is actually, you're right. It is a monotypic genus.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's one species, and it is a parasite in the eggs of sturgeon and other similar sturgeony fish.
Okay. So yeah, reading here, it's like one of the very few animals that actually live inside of other animals. Like the cells of other animals, there are very, very few parasites live inside the cells. It's usually just on the organism. So they are incredibly small.
Right. One species, endocellular parasite, unusual life cycle, peculiar morphology, and high rates of DNA evolution.
Okay. So they change a lot.
Yes.
Okay. But it's still just one species.
Yes. And
Okay.
it spends a lot of its time in the oocytes of acipenseriforms, which
so
are sturgeon, paddlefish, and their extinct relatives.
Okay. Okay.
That's going to
Yeah.
cover it for our
Yeah.
lesson for the week, correct?
Yeah. The
Do you have
one
anything else?
last thing on Polypodioform, they are freshwater. So sturgeon are a freshwater
Right.
fish species. So that's why you only see them there.
Okay, and I will. I'll start our ending segments
Okay.
with our amazing species. We're going to
Yeah.
be talking about the branching fire coral, also known as Millipora alsicoinus.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't put this in the cheat sheet at all for us today, so Alex has no idea what we're talking about.
I am lost. We were kind of rushed this week a little bit. We were both very busy.
Yeah, we'll say that. I was busy too.
Yeah.
Alex was very busy. I was just busy-ish.
Yeah.
But they are vulnerable, according to the IUCN.
Okay.
Which is better than most of the other things we've been talking about.
Better than most of the other coral we've talked about.
Right. It's common. However, since coral reefs are declining, we're putting this in the vulnerable category as they are expected to rapidly decline in the oncoming future. They were assessed 1st of June 2021, being published in 2023 by these assessors and these reviewers.
So relatively recently as far as endangered species go, especially something like this.
Yeah, I want to say that that's because it's a coral, and corals are the top or second top. So when it comes to biodiversity regions, we talked about it for at least 3 weeks on the show, how it's rainforests and coral reefs at the top.
Yeah, these are corals are the rainforest of the ocean.
Right. So we're talking about hotspots for species diversity, species populations, things like that. So manage them and keeping a track on their populations is vital and key to preserving not just their own livelihood, but thousands upon thousands of other species.
Okay.
It falls in the class Hydrozoa, so it's not actually in the coral family.
It's not a true coral.
It's not a true coral.
Okay.
It is one of those hydra-like things, coral-ish, but more Medusazoa in life cycle. It has all of these places as regions that it lives in.
So
I will go back to the map so you guys can get a better look.
The tropics
visually.
of the Atlantic Ocean.
The Atlantic Ocean.
Especially the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean.
What is this here? Why am I blanking here? Bermuda? Yes. Off the coast of the African islands, around the Atlantic side of Africa, but not really on the mainland of Africa.
Okay.
Found in that coastal shallow region, 1 meter to 40 meters, not quite hitting the no light zones.
Yeah.
They are decreasing, just like most other coral populations in the world. They have a 10-year generation. I'm sure they live much longer, but it's 10 years until they can reproduce again.
Okay.
From when they kind of hatch. Similar threats that we talked about last week with our staghorn coral. Lots of residential, commercial development just causing lots of traffic and whether it be divers or whatnot,
Taurus, as it
fishing,
says
yeah,
there.
tourists as a whole, fishing and harvesting, aquaculture type things, um, jewelry, even. Like, a lot of people when they go to the beach, they get like some type of coral on their necklace, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
or a bracelet. Uh, as well as the norm temperature extremes, global warming, what have you, storms and flooding caused by this temperature, uh, whether it be increased rainfall or whatnot.
Yeah. So is this something that could be bleached like regular coral, or no? It's not something we talked about too much today when we were
Right.
talking about the
That's something
coral,
we talked
but
about last week where these anthozoan coils, since they have that carbonate like structure, um,
the bleaching more has to do with those symbiotic algae that we talked about, where the corals become too stressed and they actually kick out the algae from the coral bodies.
right,
Um,
right.
so that's what they lose their color, and that's what the bleaching is, just the white calcium skeletons of the corals. Now, it's something that can be recovered if they're able to recover quickly, but if they stay without the algae for a longer period of time, it will kill the coral because they feed off of the algae.
I would assume that as part of that, it does use microalgae
Okay.
within its tissue, so I'd assume that is part of it would be part of that coil bleaching
Okay.
that you've been talking about.
Okay.
Right.
All right. So
Same old here for coils. Lots,
yeah.
lots of same threats as saghorn coral,
Yeah.
just different name.
Okay. Yeah. So then go into the last segment. Nature's Most Wanted, our invasive species of this week. And kind of it's accidentally spoiled it.
Teased it.
I teased it before. Is the green crab. So this is off of the NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration uh, website. So it is an invasive crab, of course, in the marine, so ocean environments from the coastal waters of Europe. So let me pull up my map here so you can see, and into the very northern tip of Africa. But now in those red areas, you can see it's been introduced, and those green areas show there's a potential range that it could grow to. So keeping in line with the coral, that eastern coast of the United States. Now that is much more north, so they are a cooler, like that temperate, colder weather species. But there are cold weather or cold water corals that do live sort of like, especially the southernmost point. But up here, you start getting more of the sea grasses and things like that. So, of course, transported in ballast water on merchant ships, like a lot of things, um, a lot of like other aquatic invasive species just comes over, like in that ballast water, which is what ships use to kind of how they sit in the water, keeps them from rocking too much. And they are quite a menace. You can see here they aggressive predators, hunt and eat prey, destroy seagrass, and outcompete local species. It's an invasive species. The problem that they are real worried about is the fact that they can devour juvenile king crab, other species of crab, as well as juvenile salmon. So, like the little teeny tiny baby salmon, these
The
crabs
salmon
will,
fry.
yeah, the fry, they will catch and eat them. And as I said, because they're invasive, they outcompete. They're voracious predators. They will significantly impact those populations if they are allowed to stick around. And then, as well as that eelgrass habitat, they destroy, that those larvae use to hide from the bigger predators. There's something like, if anyone's heard, like Alaska, their crabbing industry. Have you ever heard of the show
Deadliest catch.
Deadliest Catch? Thank you. The moment I said it, it's left my mind. There's billions of dollars in fishery up there for salmon, crab, other marine organisms that are used for food. It could become a incredibly big issue if it's allowed to move northward up into Alaska and the Bering Sea. So this is something that if you see it, of course, report it. Kill it if you're able to, but definitely let someone know that needs to know, so that way they can try to do something about it. It says here, I'm going to butcher this name. I apologize. Metlakatla Indian Community Department of Fish and Wildlife confirmed they did see them in Alaska on the Annette Islands Reserve. So they are moving northward, which they were really hoping not to do. So, like I said, something to look for. Identifying them, of course, they are green. They're green. The green crab, which I don't know if I shared the scientific name for them. I don't know if it's on here or not.
Here, I'll hook a brother up here.
I had it over on my other thing here. Carcinus manus. But they, so not always green, kind of darker brown to dark green, little yellow patches. Right after molting, they may be orange or red. But they're not very big, only about 4 inches across, which is why they eat those fry that you see on, like those baby fish. But they're identified by these 5 spines on either side of their eyes, as well as some of these, you said that unique shell shape. It's a very like a trapezoidal shell shape. It's not, most of our native crabs have a rounder shell shape, especially for that small. So something to keep an eye on. And that is all I have for the green crab, our most wanted for this week, fitting right in with our corals and our
Absolutely.
marine ecosystems.
And 2 in a week. Lionfish and staghorns last week, and then this week is fire coral and green crabs.
Yeah.
A couple housekeeping things before we end for this week.
Yeah.
As always, be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube if that's how you view these. Give us a follow on Spotify if that's how you listen.
Give us a rate.
Yeah.
Email lifecompletestory@gmail.com.
Right.
Let us know if you have more questions about stuff we talked about. If you have something you want us to talk about, an invasive species, an amazing species you want to talk about, or just some nature thing that you find really cool that you want us to talk about, we may talk about that.
Right. And my objective for us, as well as you guys, is to have our social medias out between now and the next episode.
Yeah, need to do that.
I will try and get those up and running for you guys. Also, side note, there will be an episode next week, releasing on the 21st. There will probably not be an episode on the 28th.
We can try.
Busy. Yeah, we can try.
We'll see.
I can try to get it all.
We may try to double up.
We can double up. If we can record 2 episodes next week, we will double up and get one out for you the 21st and the 28th.
Yeah.
But thank you guys for listening.
If not, don't be alarmed.
Thank you guys for listening.
You just got to hear a little bit of Tyler's family.
Yes. Yeah. Would you like to end us how you normally do, Alex?
Yes, sir. Make sure I learn something new this week.
Yep, stay learning.
Yes, sir. All right.
Peace.